Before we start the presentation of these two battles, which will come forward in the following documentary, I think it's pertinent to point out to our foreign viewers the reasons why these two former allies ended up killing each other after Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. To put it very simply, before the white man arrived in Africa, the land that became known as Rhodesia was occupied by a number of tribes, but essentially the Shona, a peaceful nomadic tribe in the northeast, northwest, and southeast of the country, and the Ndebele people, Matabele as they called, who were an offshoot of the Zulu from South Africa. Choko Zulu was a cruel man, and a group of them broke away and moved up north under Mzilikazi and founded a homeland in the Bulawayo region. Of course, the Zulu people are very warlike, and it wasn't long before they started dominating the relatively peaceful nomadic Mashona people. And they would go into villages and kill the men and take the women and the cattle. And if you know anything about African customs, cattle theft is the equivalent of robbing another person's bank. Now, this went on for a long time before the white man moved up into what became Rhodesia from South Africa. And so there's this huge animosity between the Mashona and the Ndebele peoples, real deep hatred. When the War of Liberation, or the Bush War, came along, these two peoples put aside their differences and fought against the white Rhodesian army. When the goal was achieved on the 18th of April 1980, their friendship started to fall apart very, very quickly and resorted back to the ancient days of wanting to kill each other off. Well, that wasn't very long in coming. Less than 18 months after Rhodesia gained independence, they started their feud, as will be described in the following presentation. And indeed, they even killed each other during the War of Liberation in the south of the country. ZANLA and ZIPRA had heated, hard-fought battles between each other, even though they were allies fighting against the white government. So I think this will explain some of the background as to the reasons for the battle that you're about to have unfold in front of you. Thank you. The following audio presentation is about the Entumbane 1 and 2 battles fought in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe in November 1980 and February 1981 consecutively. Troop movements during Entumbane 1 are represented by dashed lines on the map, and Entumbane 2 with solid lines. Entumbane 1. In late September or early October 1980, a ZIPRA motorized infantry brigade arrives from Zambia and is based at Gwai River Mine, shown as Assembly Point AP, Alpha Papa. It comprises of roughly 800 to 1,000 men, although ZAPU leader Joshua Nkomo claimed the number was 5,000. The unit was equipped with Land Rovers, ZIL, and gas trucks, plus BTR 152 armored personnel carriers. On the 16th of October 1980, the first clash in an urban area between ZIPRA and ZANLA occurred in Chitungwiza near Salisbury, while waiting to be integrated into the Zimbabwean army. 3,000 ZANLA combatants exchanged fire with 1,200 men from ZIPRA. President Mugabe accused ZIPRA of firing on civilians, pushing the tension between the two groups to a new high. On the 29th of October, 4 ZANU-PF supporters are killed and 16 injured by a grenade that explodes in an arms cache in the west of Salisbury, now Harare. The next day, ZANLA and ZIPRA start shooting wildly at each other in Chitungwiza, resulting in 5 civilian deaths with 16 injured. Early November 1980, 3 trains comprising 49 wagons crossed the Victoria Falls Bridge, carrying 2,000 tons of ZIPRA weaponry with armored cars. The cargo is consigned to Brady Barracks, Bulawayo, but 2 of the trains are diverted to Impofu siding south of Det and taken to Assembly Point Mike at Gwai River Mine. The 3rd train is intercepted by elements of 1 RAR and removed to Methuen barracks. On the 8th of November 1980, the Minister of Finance, Enos Nkala, makes an address on the first of a two-day ZANU-PF local election rally at White City Stadium in Bulawayo, threatening the imposition of a one-party ZANU-PF state in Zimbabwe. And on the following day, the 9th of November 1980, Nkala's address was seen as extremely provocative, labeling Nkomo's party as an enemy of the state and that its armed wing ZIPRA should be monitored at all times. This was met by a jeering and stone-throwing crowd that spilled out onto the streets of the city, rapidly turning into a riot. 34 people were injured and 1 man is killed. The violence spreads from the stadium to other parts of the city. At 17:15 that afternoon, fighting erupts between 3,000 ZANLA and ZIPRA ex-combatants in holding camps 1 and 4 in Entumbane, a suburb of Bulawayo, and soon spreads to ZANLA Camp 2 and ZIPRA Camp 3. The Zimbabwe Republic Police Support Unit and other police are deployed from bases at Ross Camp, the Drill Hall, the Plumtree Road Waterworks, and Bembisi. The violence continues, and supporters of ZANU-PF and ZAPU roam the streets, attacking perceived supporters of the other party. By 9:30 that night, the ZRP and ZRP support unit companies have suppressed the fighting and rioting. Overnight, ZIPRA and ZANLA dig in and turn their camps into defensive positions. Civilians are evicted from the areas around these two Entumbane camps at gunpoint by ZIPRA. 4 civilian men not carrying cards belonging to Joshua Nkomo are murdered. ZIPRA, having come off worst during the day's fighting, radios the ZIPRA base at Assembly Point Mike and asks for support. A ZIPRA relief column drives into Bulawayo, establishes roadblocks around the western suburbs, and reinforces the ZIPRA camp at Entumbane. A security officer, Patrick Lennon, is fatally wounded at one of these roadblocks. Shortly thereafter, a 1 RAR battle group moves to Brady Barracks from Methuen Barracks. 3 off-duty RAR men in civilian clothes, Private George Tawanza, Lance Corporal Robson Kujinga, and Private Matthew Siziba, are murdered at a ZIPRA roadblock at Magwegwe Cemetery. On the 10th of November 1980, a cordon is thrown around the northwestern suburbs. D Company 1 RAR deploys first along the railway line north of the Liberate Road Bridge. Elements of Support Company RAR with 75mm recoilless rifles and 81mm mortars deploy on the Victoria Falls Road. Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie companies drive further up the Victoria Falls Road to a point just south of the tented camp of the Zimbabwe National Army's 1.3 Battalion at Glenville, then walk south to the railway line just west of Camps 1 and 4. Elements of Support Company with 60mm mortars and a Vickers heavy machine gun deployed near the railway line north of Camp 1. The plan is to deal with Camp 1, which holds ZANLA troops, then Camp 4, ZIPRA troops, then Camp 2 with ZANLA troops, and finally Camp 3 holding ZIPRA, all in a consecutive manner. The newly formed Zimbabwe National Army's 1.2 Battalion arrives from Entumbane to reinforce the cordon. ZIPRA attacks the ZANLA camp at dawn, and fighting continues all day between the two factions. An RAR position comes under fire, but fire is not returned. A delegation of senior ZIPRA and ZANLA officers arrive in Entumbane to negotiate a ceasefire, but are met with accurate gunfire and 2 of their number are wounded. An Air Force Sky Shout aircraft is sent over the camps in the afternoon, demanding a ceasefire, but it too is driven off by heavy gunfire. Later in the day, with Alpha and Bravo companies 1 RAR in the lead and with C Company in reserve, advance in extended line towards the enemy camps. Air Force hunters scream low as they advance. After ineffective fire at the advancing troops, both the ZIPRA and ZANLA camps call for a ceasefire. Jomiso Debengwa from ZIPRA and Rex Nongo, also known as Solomon Juru from ZANLA, meet Brigadier Mike Shoot, the commander of 1 brigade. Shoot, Debengwa, and Nongo enter Entumbane and persuade both factions to give up their heavy weapons. ZIPRA relief columns return to Assembly Point Mike at the Gwai River mine. The official death toll of this entire incident is 15 combatants from ZIPRA and ZANLA and upwards of 190 civilians, with a further 500 injured. Apart from the 3 murdered RAR men, there were no army casualties. Not one shot was fired by army personnel. Although fighting in Bulawayo subsides, flare-ups continue all over the country. 3 ZIPRA men are abducted in Chitungwiza, Harare. 1 is found dead, with 2 missing. Later, the bodies of 3 ZANLA men are found. Tit-for-tat reprisals mount. Problems escalate at the Zimbabwe National Army's 2-2 battalion based in Mtoko, north of the capital, when 6 ZIPRA men are abducted. 3 of them escape. 1 is killed and 2 are badly injured. And the final tally from this event is 4 ZIPRA and 3 ZANLA murdered, with 2 ZIPRA missing and a further 2 badly injured. On the 27th of November 1980, 3 off-duty ex-ZIPRA men from 3-1 battalion are abducted by ZANLA men from the Assembly Point Foxtrot at Zapasi in Buhera. 1 escapes, 1 missing, believed dead, 1 killed. And on the 29th of November 1980, a group of ex-ZIPRA are attacked on a train near Ntali. That same day, at a rally in Gutu, a staged assassination attempt of Robert Mugabe was carried out. A ZANLA man fired a few shots, forcing 2 ZIPRA men in the crowd to panic and bolt. Both were shot at and later accused of being the culprits. 1 is wounded but escapes, while the other is murdered with 17 bullets fired into his body. A rifle was thrust into his dead hands. As a result of the staged event, all ex-ZIPRA personnel from 4-3 battalion, fearing for their lives, absconded into the bush, leaving only 12 ZIPRA in camp. In December 1980, RAR companies continued to fortify and occupy Entumbane Bear Hall, doing it in rotation. Support companies' 81mm mortars on Scorpion mortar carriers are also stationed there. Vehicles are positioned against the interior walls of the bear hall to allow men to stand on them and fire over the top of the wall. 2 names are proposed for the base: Rorke's Drift, proposed by 2nd Lieutenant John Hopkins of Welsh heritage, and the Alamo, proposed by Lieutenant Fleetwood, an American. The name Alamo wins. 4 Eland 90 armoured cars from the Zimbabwe Armoured Regiment, manned by national servicemen and under the command of Sergeant Stephen Devine, are brought to Methuen Barracks to bolster the 1 RAR battle group. 500 extra ZANLA men are brought in to enlarge the ZANLA contingent in Entumbane. The ZIPRA force at Assembly Point Mike was thought to comprise of 6,000 men at this point, supported by T-34 tanks, BRDM-2 armoured cars, BTR-152 armoured personnel carriers, D-30 artillery, PTSM amphibious cargo carriers, GSP bridging equipment, and various anti-aircraft weapons which could be used in the ground role. The large ZIPRA force at 1 Brigade battle camp at Essexvale, southeast of the city, had 10 T-34 tanks and a fair number of BTR-152 armoured personnel carriers and other vehicles. Over the Christmas break, 300 ZIPRA men went AWOL from the National Army's 4.3 and 3.1 battalions, making their way to Entumbane and Gwai River mine. In early January, there are further murders in Chitungwiza. On the 5th of January 1981, ZIPRA at Chitungwiza and Entumbane, fearing for their safety, refused to take part in an accelerated integration process into the combined Zimbabwe National Army. 100 ZANLA are moved to Entumbane from AP Foxtrot. ZIPRA from Chitungwiza are moved to Zimbabwe at Gwai River Mine, thus ending Entumbane 1, which kicks off again later in January 1981. Entumbane 2 is represented by solid lines on the map. In January 1981, 4-man RAR early warning OPs are established on the routes into Bulawayo, in particular at the Umguza River Bridge on the Victoria Falls Road towards Assembly Point Mike to the northwest, and in the Blue Hills on the Johannesburg Road heading towards the 1 Brigade Essex Vale battle camp to the southeast of the city. Anti-tank hunter-killer teams in 4-man 6 are trained to fire RPG-7s, to be deployed well forward by helicopters to intercept and ambush any ZIPRA armored vehicles trying to move towards Bulawayo. On the 11th of January 1981, Mugabe demotes Joshua Nkomo from his post of Home Affairs Minister to Public Services Minister, which is a massive slap in the face for him. And on the 13th of January 1981, there are 3 separate incidents of ZIPRA and ZANLA exchanging fire with each other while out on patrol in Chitungwiza, Harare. On the 8th of February 1981, a full-scale fight starts between former ZIPRA and ZANLA members of the newly formed Zimbabwe National Army's 4-1 Battalion at Connemara Barracks, stationed between Gwillow and Quipped. Former ZIPRA men gain control of the arsenal and shoot at their ex-ZANLA comrades. The former ZANLA men escape into the surrounding bush. The mutiny is diffused by senior officers from 4 Brigade. The mutineers on both sides are eventually fired from the Zimbabwe National Army. On the 10th of February 1981, fighting erupts at the newly formed Zimbabwe National Army's 1-3 Battalion in Glenville near the Bulawayo Motor Racing Circuit on the Victoria Falls Road. There is a rush for weapons held in the armory, and ZIPRA win once again, forcing ZANLA men to scatter into the surrounding bush, leaving 12 dead behind them. Around 70 former ZANLA men flee to a nearby secretarial college owned by Joshua Nkomo, harassing students there for several days. In this incident, 12 ZIPRA ZANLA are killed. At 2000 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Mick McKenna of 1 RAR gets a call at Methuen Barracks telling him about the events at Glenville. He dispatches the 4 Elan 90s with D Company in support, and in line abreast, they storm the camp straight through the tents, encountering no resistance. The troops are accompanied by Brigadier Mike Shute and ZIPRA and ZANLA liaison officers in a bid to restore discipline and order. 2 ex-ZIPRA captains of 1-3 Battalion, hiding under their beds in the tents, were run over by the armoured cars and seriously injured. A British military advisory training team, commonly known as BMAT, arrives the next morning to find the ex-ZIPRA members of the battalion they'd been training squatting in rows in the underpants. "While you were away, your battalion fell apart," they were told with a degree of sarcasm. And on the 11th of February 1981, the day is spent sorting out the mess at Glenville, and then the RAR soldiers return to Brady Barracks. In the evening, fighting breaks out among the men of the newly formed 1-2 Battalion at Entumbane outside Bulawayo. This time, it's the former ZANLA men who gain control. 1-2 Battalion had originally been deployed with other government units to deal with the Entumbane fighting in November 1980. Its conduct was to be used as evidence of successful integration of both ZIPRA and ZANLA ex-combatants into the new Zimbabwe National Army. It failed in the attempt. ZIPRA men working on an agricultural project at Bulawayo Dam, southeast of Bulawayo, rushed to the mutiny, setting up roadblocks on the main road between Philabusi and Mabalalala. The deaths and injuries from this event are not known. At 8 o'clock that evening, a three-way battle breaks out at Entumbane, with ZIPRA and ZANLA firing at each other, as well as C Company 1RAR, commanded by Major Lionel Dyke, at the Alamo. The firing was very intense. One RAR battle group and its attached Eland 90s moved to 1 Brigade HQ at Brady Barracks in Bulawayo, while 4 T-54 tanks from E Squadron, Zimbabwe Armoured Regiment, plus a troop of 3 25-pounder guns from the Artillery Regiment are brought to Brady Barracks from Salisbury. D Company 1 RAR are sent to cordon off the western suburbs from the city centre. They are attacked by a large group of ZIPRA, but supported by the 81mm of Support Company, managed to seize high ground at Lurkers Ridge, just west of the Liberate Road rail bridge. Just then, a radio message is received from the OP in the Blue Hills southeast of Bulawayo, saying an armoured column is on its way from Essexvale to the Gwanda Road, comprising BTR 152 armoured personnel carriers and T-34 tanks. The Eland 90s are sent from Brady Barracks to destroy the column, with supporting troops from Support Company and 1 platoon, A Company 1 RAR. At the intersection of George Avenue and Selborne Avenue, the Eland 90s halt at a red traffic light, intending to turn left onto Selborne Avenue, now called Takawira Avenue. This road in turn becomes the Gwanda Road. A BTR 152 passes in front of the lead Eland 90, travelling into the centre of Bulawayo. It's completely destroyed by a 90mm round. On the assumption that this BTR 152 is the lead vehicle of the Essexvale armoured column, the Eland 90s and RAR troops turn left into that road and travel out on the Gwanda Road until just before a slight right-hand bend in the road at the top of the hill, just past the Hilltop Motel, near the Skyview Drive-In, where they lay in ambush. And on the 12th of February 1981, at 1:15 in the morning, pickets that have been sent forward report that 2 BTR 152s are on their way. As they crest the hill, they are destroyed by the Elands waiting in ambush. A further 2 BTR 152s surrender, while another BTR 152 escapes into the side roads and is rammed by a police vehicle, causing serious damage to the BTR 152. On another road leading to Bulawayo, 3 platoon A Company ambush a Peugeot station wagon, destroying it with machine gun fire and capturing 8 ZIPRA officers in the process. In this incident, an unknown number of ZIPRA were killed, and of course the 8 officers were captured. At the same time, a brand new Toyota Land Cruiser is stopped on the old Essexvale Road leading into Bulawayo by a platoon of A Company. 6 ZIPRA officers are captured and relieved of their Tokarev pistols. Focus now shifts to the other side of the town, where C Company in the Alamo at Entumbane are under tremendous pressure and running out of ammunition. Constable Moraka Chinzi and Patrol Officer Alistair Taylor, both plainclothes CRD officers, are in a vehicle in Luvevi when they are stopped by an armed gang. They are pulled from their vehicle and assaulted. Taylor is shot dead. Chinzi is told to return to his station and is shot in the back as he walked away. A submachine gun, a revolver, and 4 radios are stolen. At midday, a column of 12 BTR 152s and BRDM armoured personnel carriers leave Assembly Point Mike at Gwai River Mine, heading for Bulawayo. Relieved by A Company, an armoured column of B Company and the Eland 90s, commanded by Major Husher, leaves the eastern cordon to relieve the Alamo, working their way through the Umpopoma and Umbutweni towards Entumbane. A Lynx aircraft takes off from Brady Airfield in support of the RAR troops at the Alamo. Despite coming under voluminous fire from the ground, the pilot, Flight Lieutenant Colin James, puts in several strikes at ZIPRA positions. including the destruction of Zil heavy transporter filled with men. At 1300 hours on the 12th of February, the Alamo is finally relieved. In this incident, the friendly forces lost 2 ZRP CI murdered, Constable Chinzi and Patrol Officer Taylor, who was awarded the Bronze Baton by the Zimbabwean government, plus 4 RAR personnel and the officer commanding's dog wounded. Shortly thereafter, an O group is held by Lieutenant Colonel Mick McKenna at Brady Barracks, outlining a plan to deal with the ZIPRA position at Assembly Point Mike at the Guai River mine. The operation would begin with a preliminary bombardment by artillery, while T-54 tanks, supported by RAR troops, moved in from the south as the main combat assault group. Other elements would take up stop positions to block any withdrawal. One of the companies of 4-2 Battalion, formerly 2 RAR, is sent up the Vic Falls Road to set up an ambush for a ZIPRA column at Mgizi Bridge that is seen leaving the camp. A senior ZIPRA officer is sent forward from there to stop the column. The column is buzzed by 2 Air Force of Zimbabwe hunters who are patrolling up and down the Vic Falls Road. The column halts as darkness falls and then turns off the road and onto a dirt road at Kenwa. It travels no further towards Bulawayo and camouflages itself in the bush, disappearing from view. And on the 13th of February 1981, a column of Eland 90s, supported by RAR troops, are sent to Essex Vale. En route, they encounter an abandoned T-34, which is driven back to Brady at the Essex Vale battle camp. ZIPRA is persuaded to surrender its remaining tanks, armoured personnel carriers, and heavy weapons. And on the 14th of February 1981, there's scattered fighting throughout the city. Western Commonage Police Station is attacked, followed by the ep316 Police Station, right next to where the whole thing started at White City Stadium on the 9th of November, 3 months previously. However, the second battle for the city of Bulawayo came to an end, with over 400 dead, none of whom are from the RAR battle group. Armoured vehicles and heavy weaponry at Guai River Mine and Essex Vale battle camp are surrendered by ZIPRA and removed to Brady Barracks. ZIPRA's military capability is totally destroyed. ZIPRA's military defeat gave Mugabe the courage to further his aims of crushing the Ndebele people totally, principally to remove them as an opposition, but also to pay back all the times the Shona tribes had been laid waste by the Ndebele before the white man arrived in the area. His reprisals led to the death of tens of thousands of the Ndebele people in Matabele land in Operation Gukuruhundi that wore on from 1982 right to the end of 1987. The troops he used to massacre the people there was the 5th Brigade Zimbabwe National Army, trained by the North Koreans. Thank you for listening to this audio presentation. I hope you found it enjoyable. And if there are any questions you'd like to ask, please leave them in the comments section. Thank you.
And in 1981, in 80 there was a bit of a skirmish in the western suburbs, which is the native locations. And there were skirmishes going on there forever, and in 81, a friend of mine who was actually a major in INRR, he invited me down to his family farm. They had some nice bass dams down there, and he imported a film from the States, on bass fishing. And so I went round to OM's. We watched this film. We had a couple of drinks, and on my way home, I could see all the traces of that and bangs, and coming from the western suburbs. And I thought, natives are restless tonight, And 5:30 next morning, this Dudley phones me up and he says, "Hey, Wayne, Bulawayo's been invaded, And he said, "We've got to get down to Brady, we're in big trouble here, Anyway, so I grabbed all my kit, off to Brady. And as I'm driving into the barracks, I see here's one of the tow trucks pulling a BTR 152. Those Russian armored personnel carrier things.
BTR 80 or 81, yeah.
And they So I followed him down because I knew we'd probably end up at the 2nd Battalion, because they were sort of the active battalion as such. And I just followed these guys down, and I got out, and there were 2 others there. And I must tell you, the guy that shot those, it was shot, they had an Eland armored car up on the top of on the main road, and these guys were coming towards them. And then I don't know if you know on that BTR that there's 2 windows separate, and there's a metal strip in the centre.
Yeah.
And every round went right through the centre of that, between those 2.
Wow.
It was deadly accurate. And of course, in the back, it just smoked everything. There was nothing left in there. Another one, there was on the driver's seat, all there was a bit of underpants, left. They just shredded them. But it was chaos, because nobody knew what was going on. And there was an officer saying, right, who's from the RLI? And hands went up. And who's SS? And hands went up. And where are you from? I'm from Boat Squadron. And he's trying to get people together, I guess.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who was in the 6th Bat, ex-RLI guy, he said to me, Wayne, come with me. We're going out to Essexville, to the battle camp there, where the ZIPRA were based. And that's where those armoured personnel carriers had come from. So I said to him, right, fine, Anyway, I was then told to go and get a weapon. And so I went and picked up FN rounds and one thing and another. And I saw Bob, and I said to him, what's happening, Bob? And he said, I've asked these guys for MAGs. He said, I want 8 MAGs. And he said, they're not issuing any of us with an MAG. He said, only rifles. So he said, you know what, I'm not going out to that battle camp there without MAGs. And he said, we didn't have any rocket launchers, mortars, nothing. So he said, it was MAGs and FNs, nothing. And they said, no MAGs. So I ended up, we had an officer who will remain unnamed, Niner Rod, and he said to me, you're a driver. He said, we're going to Entumbane. And I knew Entumbane, that's where all the trouble was, So I knew the western suburbs well, because I'd worked there over the years. But Entumbane was a new township, and I said, no, I don't know where Entumbane is. I said, but I can take you anywhere else. And he said, no, we have to go to Entumbane because the RAR are in trouble. So I said, okay, fine. So this guy said, I know where Entumbane is. And so he said, well, you drive us there. No radios, 1 vehicle, all the things that you shouldn't do. So we jump on the back of this thing and we're going along. And he's talking to us. He said, look, don't shoot until we are shot at. And if you see looters, you can take them out, but nobody else until we actually shot at. So we thought, okay, doesn't sound right to me. But anyway, we went along, and of course, we were in a map, luckily. And I was standing up here. The next thing you hear, the bullets are going over your head.
Yeah.
Down. And then they ping, ping on the side. And of course, all the guys closed the little holes there, closed all those up. We're taking rounds, you see. And I said, what's happening? And he said, no. Anyway, those that disappeared, driving along again. And I'm standing up looking down on the left-hand side, because on the right was kind of built up. But on the left hand, there was a wide open field. And I could see 4 of these tours walking across, 2 carrying RPGs over their shoulder. One had an RPG, and another had an AK. And with that close, the guy said, can we take these guys out? And he said, no, don't shoot. We're trying to be making peace here. We've got to get to the RAR. And anyway, these guys all disappeared. And then again, there was a chap, and I never saw this, so I can't confirm, but he was on the right-hand side, and he actually saw someone fire an RPG at us. And it was at a distance, and it landed in the field, but it didn't explode. It obviously didn't go off. But then we started taking rounds again, ping, ping on the side of the truck. And eventually we stopped. The guy said, here we are. It was actually the municipal officers. And I just said, well, this is not where the fighting is, And he said, well, I don't know where to go from here. So we decided, look, we need to get off and have a pee break. We were obviously in the wrong place and having no comms with anybody. We were kind of stuck there, and we all debussed to have a pee. And I walked around the corner and I just saw some movement. And there were 2 youngsters, one with a shouldered AK and one shouldered RPG. And he looked at me, and I could see he was scared as hell. And I wasn't sure whether I should shoot the guy or what I should do, And they just turned around and slowly walked away, And the other guys came around and said, "What's going on?" I said, "You got these guys just here, They weren't causing any." I said, "Look, if they had tried anything, they obviously would have pulled them, But it was just how unreal this whole situation was, You had those that were on sides, and then there were guys that were off sides, So getting back into the vehicle, and we got a few more pings and some dirty rounds over the top. And I said to the officer, I said, "Listen," I said, "to be honest, I would rather be sitting at home looking after my family than be sitting here getting shot at and not being able to shoot back,
Yeah.
And all the guys on the back of the vehicle said, "Yeah, no, true." So we ended up, it was strange. It was not much to do with the military, but we ended up at the Scout Hall, which was right opposite Hamilton High School. And we were told we're going to overnight there and return back to, if nothing happened during the night, we were returning back to Brady Barracks the following day. Anyway, so we had to do guard duty, and I sort of pulled a short straw, and I was like, I think from 3:30 to 4:30, something like that. And it was two of us on guard, and I was looking across at the open fields of the school, and I saw a light come on. And I said to the guy, "Do you see that?" And he said, "Yes." And I could see somebody walking in a shadow. And I said, "There's somebody's broken into the school, So I said, "Look, go and call," because we're thinking about looters, and So he went to call the officer, and they took forever. And anyway, I decided to go across and then investigate. So I went across there. The light went out, and I knew that because I was on the PTA, and so I knew that was where the booze was kept, and we used to have our meetings up there. So I see this guy coming down the stairs with this cardboard box, and I fixed up my gal, said to him, "Stop and drop," and he dropped the box, and I thought, I can't kill a guy for he was a young coloured guy. But I thought I'll take a leg off or something. Bang! And it went right between his legs, but on the steps. And I think he must have had a change of underwear, because that was pretty close, Anyway, the following day, the police arrived, and they actually caught the bugger, They had him up for theft, and that actually was the last time I fired a shot in anger. That was it. And we went back to Brady. Handed in our weapons. There was no debrief or anything like that. "Thank you very much." Nothing, no pay, bugger all. And I eventually said to my friend Dudley, I said, "Hey, if you ever call me up again," I said, "unless it's an official thing, you're not going to see me." I said, "The days of being shot at are over for me, But the sad thing was, we still, right into 1982, we still had all our kit. We were still on strength, and we never had a final parade. And then there was an incident where somebody, some CIO raided someone's house and found camouflage kit and something else that he shouldn't have had because he didn't have a military commitment. And then the next thing was we were told, everybody who's got any military equipment, go down to Brady and hand all your kit in. And that's what we all did. We just took all our kit, whatever we had, webbing and whatever, and just dumped it, And there was no receipt or anything like that. I was quite glad, because the stuff that I'd been issued with 18 years before, half it wouldn't fit me, and I don't think I even had it. It was things like socks and underrods and things like that. So that was kind of the end of my time in the TA. It was 1982.
Wayne, there are quite a few questions that have popped into my head about that Entumbane thing.
Go ahead.
First of all, what armoured vehicles were you driving in? Were they the crocodiles, or what were you in?
First of all, we had, in 2nd Battalion, we had Thames Traders, and we'd actually just got rid of the Chevs, the four-wheel drive Chevs, which was Second World War vintage. Then the RL came in, the Bedford RL. There were two models, the RL and the RM. We mainly had the RL, four-wheel drive. Not in any way mine protected. They had tried. What they had done was quite a clever idea. They put water in the tires. So they're 1120 tire, a huge tire, filled it up with water. And the idea was, the Bedfords were actually petrol driven, and there was always a worry about detonating a landmine and the thing catching fire as well. And the water did two things: it suppressed fire, and it also took some of the blast. And I know we've hit some mines where it basically just blows the wheel off, and buggers up the drum in that. And others, like in Eddie's instance, where there was some severe damage to the vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah, tell you the vehicles. The vehicle that we had when we went to Entumbane was a map, which stood for mine and ambush protected. So they were pretty good because you had armor at angles up, and little slides you could open up and put your weapon through.
Was that a Nissan?
Fire through the holes. Yeah, they're
a Nissan.
A lot of them on Nissans.
Yeah, so that's a crocodile.
Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask you is, how many, I know the RAR were involved in there, but how many white guys actually went in the vehicles that you were talking about?
On our Entumbane.
Yeah.
I guess on our vehicle it was probably about 20 of us.
Yeah.
20, 22, something like that. But there were other vehicles deployed as well. And as I said, there was no debrief afterwards. So I never knew what happened to the vehicles that were supposed to go down to the battle camp, because that was the problem. And they deployed some of the vehicles in and around, sort of on the edge of the western suburbs and town itself. But as I say, with no communication, no nothing.
I'm absolutely amazed that that was 1981, a year and a half after the war ended.
Yeah,
I'm absolutely amazed that any white guy would even put on a uniform and get involved in that. What was your sort of mindset at the time?
Well, the fact was that we were never demobbed. We were still on strength.
Wow.
Right up until 82, when we went there, I actually asked the chap. I said, I want a signature for this stuff, and sign me off,
Yeah.
They said just go, so just go.
So that was obviously the adjutants and the base captains and all that were all African guys belonging to ZANLA or ZIPRA.
You see, if you look at the TA setup, there was a lot of civilians in what they referred to as 9RR rear, would be the officers there. You would have a couple of ladies in the office and a couple of clerks and that sort of thing. But when the war came about, everything just sort of closed down. There was no disbandment as such. It was just close the doors and we'll see what happens.
Which was terrible.
I asked many, as I say, this friend of mine, Duddy, he was a major. He was acting major, actually. And he said to me, I said, what's going on? And he said, I haven't a clue. He said, as far as we know, we're still on strength and we can be called up and what. And I, as I say, when Dudley phoned me, I actually phoned, he said to me, try and get as many guys that you know that have military experience. And I said, well, Dick across the road, he's taken the hour run. The chap diagonally opposite me, he's sitting in with a serious head injury in what's the rehabilitation place in the east, Sangha Lodge.
Yeah. And
my other friend across the road, he was on holiday. He was in Intef. So the only other chap.
This was something. Sorry to interrupt you, because we're going to have to wind up now. Is this something that Dudley sort of sucked out of his own thumb, or was he called up by?
I don't know who called him up. I haven't a clue. Somebody must have said we need to get the gang together, but exactly who? To be honest, I didn't see him at Brady when I was there.
Yeah.
It was only some months after that I saw him, and we didn't discuss it either. It was just a case of that's what happened. I just said to him, "Don't ever phone me again. I ain't going." But I think most of us thought that, we need if we've been asked to go there, I think it could, if it wasn't for those armored cars, I think we could have been in a bit of trouble, because when those things come trundling down the road and you've got nothing to take them on with, it could have been nasty, a lot of injuries,
In hindsight, we should have joined ZIPRA, hey?
Well, you know, the RAR don't get much praise for it, but if it wasn't for the RAR, I reckon Bulawayo could have been overrun. Those guys did a bloody good job. I mean, they went down there and they just took on anybody that, I think they called it the Alamo. You know, they were surrounded by all sorts. Everybody having to go at each other, you know.
I mean, politically, we should have got the RAR and taken all the white guys and gone and joined ZIPRA to get rid of ZANLA.
Yeah, well, you know, that's politics for you. As I say, you know, it was such a mess up that, I mean, like, as I say, with us at the TA, we hadn't a clue what was going on. You know, at least the regular guys had their final parades and got their money and moved on, you know, and we were like stuck there, you know, like...
Because the Zimbabwean National Army at that point was terribly weak. Mugabe was dependent on the RAR. And I reckon if the RAR and the white guys had joined with ZIPRA, that would have been the end of Mugabe.
Yeah, well, that was...
Pity it never happened.
Tongogara was one of those that stood out. He kind of knew that he needed the European.
Yeah.
And he was... I think he would have probably made peace with Nkomo, and things would have been a little different. But, you know, it's like all these, as you know, all these guys that get bumped off these days. So the motor vehicle accident, you know. And he was obviously the first with the prime target, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, we're going to have to end off now because it's been quite a long time, but it's been a very interesting talk. And just in closing, did you ever sit down and say to yourself, what the hell was it all for? Was it worth it? What were your feelings when it all just ended like that?
I've heard a couple of you guys on here talking about one thing. Two things that stick out to me is, one is you always hear guys sleeping with their eyes open, sleeping with one eye open, and for many years, I mean, I've always been a light sleeper. And any little noise and I was up and awake, you know, like a night ape, you know. And the other thing was, well, I think you mentioned it the other day. I'd moved down to Johannesburg for some time before I returned to Zim, and I always carried my 9mm 24/7. And whenever I went out to dinner or anything like that, I always sat in the corner with my wife always said, "Why do you sit with your back?" And I said, "Well, because I can see the enemy, you know." And
absolutely.
It was a strange thing, you know. When you guys mentioned it the other day, I said, you know, I've been doing that for 50 years, you know.
I didn't even realize it was an indication of that until I'd read it somewhere else.
My wife picked it up and she said, "Why do you always do that?" I said, I guess it's because... Yeah.
Well, Wayne,
it's super.
It's been lovely talking to you. It really has been an interesting talk.
And,
I hope John can stitch it all together with the problems we've had. But apart from that, it's been a very good talk.
If there's anything else in the future, any questions or anything like that, always give me a shout. I'm always available.
Good. Thanks very much, Wayne. Take care.
Okay, my friend.
Thank you.
Look after yourself.
You too.
Cheers now.